I'm Marisol. My grandparents died in my arms. I bathed them, fed them, held their hands through every hospital night. My sister never showed up. But when the will was read, she got the mansion, the company, and me. I got a rotting farmhouse, and their sneers. That's all you deserve. But then, the lawyer paused, and what he revealed next changed everything. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from, and has your family ever made you feel invisible? The courthouse annex smelled faintly of old wood and coffee that had been sitting too long on a burner. Sunlight poured through narrow windows, slicing across the polished oak table where everyone had already found their places. It was supposed to be a solemn gathering, our grandparents' will reading, but the atmosphere felt more like a board meeting where I was the intern, not the granddaughter who had been there every night through their last breaths. I paused at the doorway, fingers tightening on my bag. The chair assignments were already set. My older sister, Clarabelle, sat confidently at the head of the table, a silk scarf draped just so, our parents flanking her like she was royalty. She didn't look at me when I walked in. No one did. Only the lawyer nodded, glancing at the empty seat way down at the far end near the restroom door. I crossed the room slowly, heels clicking against the worn tile, each step making the silence louder. The chair felt colder than the rest, tucked back like it was a leftover. My grandmother used to call me her shadow because I moved so quietly when I cared for her at night. Now I felt like a shadow again, here but unseen. I sat down and placed my hands in my lap. From here, the lawyer's voice would sound like it was coming from a tunnel. Clarabelle's perfume drifted all the way down the table, sharp and sweet. Our father leaned toward our mother, whispering something, and they both smirked. I couldn't hear the words exactly, but I recognized the tone. I'd heard it 1,000 times, pity mixed with contempt. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. We'll proceed." His papers rustled like wings. My stomach tightened as memories intruded. Long nights at the farmhouse, spooning soup to my grandmother, adjusting pillows for my grandfather, listening to their stories about the company they built and the land they loved. I had thought, foolishly maybe, that my devotion would mean something in the end. Clarabelle folded her hands elegantly, tilting her head like she was at a photo shoot. "Shall we begin?" she said. I kept my eyes on a crack in the table's varnish as the lawyer read out the first lines. The company, the mansion, the investments, all assigned to Clarabelle. Murmurs ran through the room like an approving current, some relatives nodding, others casting quick glances at me, then away again. I felt my chest go tight. Not from surprise, maybe I'd always known, but from the way everyone acted like it was natural, inevitable. Like the nights I stayed up checking my grandmother's oxygen machine had been invisible. The lawyer paused, then moved on to the farmhouse. The property at 16 Harbor Lane, known as the family farmhouse. He glanced at me briefly. To Marisol. My mother's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. She leaned closer to my father, and this time I caught the whisper, "That's all she deserves." He nodded. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The farmhouse, the peeling paint, the cracked pipes, the smell of mildew that never left. I pictured Clarabelle walking through the mansion by the sea, windows as tall as a dream, while I'd be patching leaks on a roof alone. Self-doubt slithered in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had been naive to expect gratitude. I'd chosen to stay, to help, to give up my own plans. Nobody had forced me. I stared at my hands, red marks still faint from lifting my grandfather in his final days. But then another image came. My grandmother's hand squeezing mine one night, eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "Don't let them make you small," she'd whispered. "Promise me." Clarabelle turned her head at last, catching my gaze down the long table. She leaned slightly across, her voice carrying just enough to reach me. "You should have done better," she said, the words sliding like ice. Something shifted inside me, not rage, not tears, but a quiet click, like a lock opening. I sat up a little straighter. I didn't respond. Not yet. Clarabelle let out a soft laugh like she'd just won a round of charades. She tilted her head, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve, then gave our mother a smile so sugary it made my jaw tense. "Thanks, Mom and Dad," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You always believed in me. I'll make the company even stronger. I promise." As if she'd ever worked a day in it. Our mother patted her hand. "Of course, sweetheart. We always knew you had the mind for business." My father nodded in agreement, glancing down the table at me like I was a stain on the cloth. "It was the right decision. The board will respect her leadership." And just like that, I became background noise in a room that once felt like it had my name etched into its bones. I kept my face still, staring straight ahead, but my vision flickered. For a moment, the dull courtroom faded. I saw my grandfather in the recliner by the old farmhouse window, pale and thin, but still sharp. He'd been watching the rain slide down the glass. I was kneeling beside him, wrapping his feet in warm socks. "You know," he said, barely above a whisper, "what you're doing here. This matters. Don't let them erase what you've done." I remember that clearly because it was the only time he'd looked me straight in the eye that month. And I believed him. For years, I clung to the idea that my love and labor meant something to someone. But now, sitting in this room, invisible in plain sight, I questioned everything. Clarabelle leaned forward again, voice light. "Guess hard work doesn't always pay off the way you think, huh, Mari?" I didn't blink. I wouldn't give her the pleasure. She shrugged. "Effort doesn't equal results, sis. Sometimes. It's just not in the cards for some people." Their laughter wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than yelling ever could. It was the sound of dismissal, of rewriting history with a grin. The lawyer continued reading, but the words blurred into a low drone. I thought about the times I'd missed sleep to stay up with Grandma when her arthritis flared, how I'd spooned lukewarm broth into her mouth, wiped drool from her chin, changed her bedding when she was too weak to move. I thought about taking Grandpa to his chemo appointments, holding his hand as he drifted off to sleep in the passenger seat of my old car. Clarabelle hadn't shown up, not once, not even a call. She always had a work trip, or a migraine, or something came up. But she still got the mansion, the company, the praise, and I got the farmhouse. "The old farmhouse will keep you busy," my father said suddenly, as if sensing my thoughts. "Plenty of repairs to do. It suits you." Suits me. Like I was some stray that should be grateful for scraps. I glanced down at my nails, trimmed short and cracked from years of scrubbing, fixing, lifting. I had built a life around service, and all they saw was a girl who didn't climb high enough. My mother tilted her head toward Clarabelle. "She has the vision, the leadership. It was always obvious. You were needed in other ways." Other ways. The kind no one puts in a will. The air felt too thick. My chest tight. I wanted to scream, to flip the damn table, to ask why love didn't weigh as much as profit in this family. But I didn't. I sat there, silent, a polite hostage in my own humiliation. And then the farmhouse bloomed in my mind. Not the version rotting at the edge of town, but the one that lived in my memories. The garden Grandpa kept. The crooked swing hanging from the old oak. The hallway where Grandma kept every photo I'd ever drawn her, still taped crookedly to the wall. That house wasn't just a burden. It was proof. Of time. Of love. Of being present when it mattered. Clarabelle might have won the spotlight, but I had the ashes. The real kind. The kind that settled after the fire, that told you something had burned because it mattered. "I hope it doesn't fall down around you," Clarabelle smirked, brushing her nails against the table. "All that wood rot? Yikes!" My jaw clenched. I said nothing. "You should really sell it," my mother chimed in. "Cut your losses. That place has taken enough from this family." I looked up. "Has it?" I asked quietly. They blinked. The lawyer glanced at me, surprised I'd spoken, but then returned to his script. I clenched my fists under the table, swallowing every word I wanted to scream, until a single memory from my grandmother's journal rose in my mind. The lawyer's voice faded to a low hum, like static on an old radio, while my sister's nails tapped a steady beat against the oak table. That sound anchored me to the present, but the memory of my grandmother's journal rose like a tide, pulling me somewhere else entirely. I could almost feel the thin paper under my fingertips. Even now, sitting at this table, the scent of her lavender lotion drifted back to me as clearly as if she were standing beside me. I remembered nights in the farmhouse kitchen, the dim yellow glow of the overhead bulb, her handwriting looping across the page while she sipped weak tea. She'd let me sit opposite her as she wrote. Sometimes she'd talk, sometimes she'd just hum, and sometimes she'd pause, hand on mine, and whisper, "Don't forget who you are, honey. They'll try to make you." I had never thought of those words as a warning, more like a comfort. Now, though, sitting here, they echoed like a bell. Clarabelle's voice cut through my haze. "You look pale, Mari. Everything okay?" She smiled sweetly, but her eyes held that same sharpness she'd had since we were kids. "I'm fine," I said softly, though my pulse raced. My mother gave a dismissive shrug and turned to my father. "She's always been like that, sensitive. It's why she was the caretaker. We needed someone steady in the house." My father didn't even glance at me. "She has the farmhouse. That's plenty. It's not like she ever wanted the business." Their words slid over me like oil over water. My eyes dropped to the wood grain of the table, but inside the journal was opening again. Grandma Etta's handwriting. "Tonight Marisol fed me broth even though her own hands shook with exhaustion. She doesn't complain. She just does what's needed. Hiram says she's the backbone." Grandpa Hiram's whisper, "You are the backbone. Don't let them rewrite history." The words stung now, not because they were untrue, but because they felt like promises broken. If they knew I was the backbone, why was I sitting at the farthest end of the table, stripped of every acknowledgement except a decaying house? A flicker of doubt clawed at me. Had I missed something? Some clause? Some note? Some last request? Did they really want it this way? Or had someone, my parents, Clarabelle, made sure the story looked different on paper? Clarabelle's nails tapped faster. "You're awfully quiet. Cat got your tongue?" I lifted my gaze, met hers, and held it a moment longer than usual. "No," I said. "Just listening." She smirked. "Good. This part's important. It's about the investments." I could feel my chest tightening, a knot of grief and disbelief. Their chatter blurred. My mind drifted again to the farmhouse, the peeling wallpaper, the smell of wood smoke in winter. My grandmother's hands in flour, making biscuits even when her joints ached. My grandfather sitting at the kitchen table, coughing between spoonfuls of oatmeal. The moments that had built me, piece by piece. That farmhouse wasn't just a burden, it was every moment they'd been alive with me, every lesson they'd left behind. It was where my worth had been formed, even if no one here wanted to see it. I inhaled slowly, grounding myself in that image, holding on to it like a lifeline. The last chair, the farmhouse, the journal, threads pulling together. Maybe the truth wasn't gone. Maybe it was just buried. Clarabelle flicked her hair over her shoulder, her voice dropping low enough for only me to hear. "You know, Mari, no one's going to remember who spoon-fed Grandma soup. They'll remember who runs the company." Her words landed like a slap. But instead of shrinking, I felt something steadier, like a small flame lighting in my chest. I straightened my back, my fingers sliding along the edge of the table. The lawyer's droning voice sharpened again, pulling me back to the present. He was turning a page, clearing his throat. And just as the memory tightened my chest, the lawyer cleared his throat and shuffled a second envelope on the table. The paper crinkled in his hand, soft but deliberate. The sound, barely noticeable, cut through the stale air of the courthouse annex like a match being struck. My eyes locked onto that second envelope, ivory, unassuming but charged. I wasn't the only one watching it. Clarabelle's posture shifted. She leaned forward slightly, her smile gone tight. "I think we're done here, aren't we?" she said, tossing a glance at our parents as if checking for backup. "The will's been read. That's everything." The lawyer didn't respond. He kept one hand resting on the envelope, like a bartender waiting to see who blinks first. My father cleared his throat. Yes. No need to drag this out." But Clarabelle couldn't help herself. Her eyes flicked down to the envelope, then darted to me, fast and sharp, before she forced a chuckle. "It's probably just housekeeping stuff. Tax documents, deed transfers, that sort of thing." She was trying to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her. Pitched just slightly too high, too polished. I'd heard that tone before. Every time she got caught in a lie, she leaned harder into confidence, and right now, her grip on it was slipping. "Shouldn't we at least see what it says?" I asked. My voice didn't waver. I didn't ask for permission. I simply let the question settle in the room. Clarabelle scoffed, but the sound was clipped. "You want more drama on a day like this? Grow up, Marisol." Mom chimed in, her tone dripping with false calm. "Sweetheart, this isn't the time for theatrics. It's been a long day. Let's not ruin it with more, speculation." Long day. I wanted to laugh. They acted like they'd run a marathon. I was the one who'd sat through weeks of hospice care, who watched skin fade from pink to gray, who'd held hands through final breaths while they were too busy closing business deals or attending charity galas. My hands clenched in my lap, nails pressing into my palm. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The tension was shifting. Clarabelle was unraveling, even if no one else had said it out loud yet. The lawyer finally lifted the envelope. "This was included in the instructions. It's to be read after the primary will." Clarabelle's chair scraped loudly against the tile as she straightened. "It's irrelevant. Dad, tell him." "Clarabelle," the lawyer said, calm as ever. "This is part of the formal proceeding. You're welcome to excuse yourself if you feel it doesn't concern you." The silence that followed was brittle. She didn't leave. Of course not. She wouldn't dare. But the flush creeping up her neck said everything. The sun outside dipped lower, casting long shadows across the table. That amber light painted the room in a fading warmth, but the air had gone cold. I sat still, almost detached, watching it all unfold as if through a pane of glass. Clarabelle's perfect exterior was beginning to fracture. It was small, a twitch at the corner of her eye, a shift in her breathing, but unmistakable. She looked like someone cornered. The lawyer slit the envelope cleanly and pulled out a single sheet of thick paper. His eyes scanned it. Then, for the first time, he looked directly at me. The pause was everything. I didn't move, but my mind raced. Grandma's journal, Grandpa's whispers, the long nights, the thankless hours, all of it spun together like threads tightening into a single rope. They had believed in me. I had to believe that meant something. My mother exhaled impatiently. "Is this going to take long?" "No," the lawyer replied. "But it may be unexpected." Clarabelle's voice broke the moment like a hammer on glass. "Enough. Whatever it is, it won't change what's already done." She was pushing too hard now, her voice too loud, her words too fast. That was when it hit me. Clarabelle's voice rose, too sharp, too desperate, and in that crack, I realized something. She was afraid. It was subtle at first, the way her voice cracked at the edges, how her words came faster, sharper. I didn't say anything, but I saw it. Everyone did. The room was quiet, uncomfortably so. Even the sunlight had started to fade through the courthouse windows, casting long streaks of gold across the floor like nature itself was trying to sneak out of the room. Then someone behind me leaned in, their voice low and casual, like we were old friends sharing gossip over coffee. "Well, at least you'll have something to fix up," he murmured. "Better than nothing, right?" I turned my head slightly but didn't meet his eyes. My lips pressed into a line. "Right," I whispered back. "Better than nothing." What did he know? What did any of them know? To them, it was just a house, rickety porch, cracked windows, sagging gutters. But to me, it was blood and time and sacrifice. The weight of it settled heavier on my shoulders. From across the room came a soft pop. A cork. I blinked, startled, as a friend of the family held out 2 glasses of champagne, grinning like we were at a wedding instead of a will reading. And there she was, Clarabelle, raising her glass high with one hand, the other wrapped around the base with a little flourish. "To the future," she said, chin lifted. "Some of us just know how to succeed." The room chuckled. Not loud, just enough. My parents clinked their glasses against hers like some warped toast at a banquet. I didn't even get a plastic cup of water. My legs felt weak beneath the table. The chair, my chair, the last one, the forgotten one, might as well have been a mile from where they sat. I could feel it pressing into my back like a reminder of where I belonged, of what I was worth to them. I lowered my gaze, and just for a second, everything blurred. My eyes didn't sting, they burned. I didn't cry. But my throat thickened, like I was swallowing gravel. And just like that, I was back there. Not in the courthouse, in the farmhouse, late at night. The creak of the old floorboards under my socks as I made my way down the hallway. The dim yellow light above the stove casting shadows on the wallpaper. My grandmother's cough from the next room. The smell of Vapo-Rub and chicken broth. I'd stood in that same spot for what felt like hours, listening to her breathing, making sure it was steady before I let myself sleep. I gave up years for them, time I didn't get back, memories I never got to make because I was busy catching theirs before they disappeared. And here I was, getting applause for it, just not the kind you want. Clarabelle's laugh snapped me out of it. It was high and sweet and fake as hell. She tossed her hair like she was in a commercial. "You know, effort doesn't always equal results," she said, her eyes flicking toward me with a smirk. "But I guess you figured that out." I stayed still, breathing, steady. One hand on my lap, the other gripping the edge of the chair just tight enough to keep me from flying apart. Did I do this to myself? Was I too quiet, too loyal? Did I let them walk all over me for so long that now they just expected me not to make a sound? The thought rose and caught in my chest like a scream I didn't let out. Maybe I should just walk, just leave the whole damn family behind, take the broken house and never speak to a single one of them again. Maybe that was freedom. A few seats over, someone clapped. Just one, awkward, pitiful clap, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to join the toast or apologize for it. It made my skin crawl. The lawyer said nothing. He just sat, still, his eyes scanning something in front of him I couldn't see. That silence from him, neutral, unreadable, somehow made it all worse. Like he could have stopped it, but chose not to. The farmhouse came back to me again. Not the warm kitchen. The cold parts. The leaks in the ceiling, the wallpaper peeling in the corners, the front steps that groaned under your weight. That house wasn't a gift. It was punishment, dressed up in nostalgia. And yet, it was mine. The only thing that was... I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my fists into the table and shout every name I'd swallowed over the years. But all I did was sit there, quiet, boiling, wondering if I'd ever feel anything but tired. Then, through the haze of it all, the lawyer cleared his throat. Softly, but with purpose. Papers shuffled again. And just when I thought my silence had broken me, the lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the table. Addressed only to me, At first I thought the envelope was a mistake, something generic, a receipt or legal copy of what I'd already been given. But then I saw the handwriting. It wasn't typed. It wasn't official. It was hers. My grandmother's script was unmistakable, delicate but steady, looping just the way she used to sign grocery lists and birthday cards. Right there on the front. For Marisol, when the time comes. The air in the room shifted. Not a single word had been spoken, but I could feel it. The attention, the tension, like the quiet before a storm that's already turned the sky the color of bruises. I didn't move. The envelope sat there in front of me, as out of place as a wedding dress in a war zone. I stared at it, unsure if I had the right to reach for it. The lawyer gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Encouraging, controlled. But before I could lift my hand, my mother's voice cut the silence like a snapped twig. "Leave it, Marisol." It's probably just one of her little notes. Clarabelle leaned forward, her elbow knocking gently into her champagne flute, as if the sound might redirect focus back to her. "Sentimental clutter," she said, all false sweetness. You know how she was toward the end, writing things she barely understood anymore. My face flushed. Shame, fury, grief, it all collided in my chest. My father didn't even look at me. He just murmured, "Don't embarrass the family. Not now." And that was it. That was the thread they'd always pulled to keep me quiet. That line? "Don't embarrass us. Not we're proud of you. Not you were there when no one else was. Just don't make a scene." As though all I'd ever been was a walking inconvenience, a reminder of things they didn't want to feel. My fingers trembled in my lap. I kept them there, frozen, like if I stayed perfectly still I might disappear altogether. Again. Clarabelle cleared her throat and looked to the lawyer. "If we could proceed?" Her voice was firmer now, the fake graciousness dropping. "This is all becoming very emotional." She smiled as if she was saving the room from a meltdown when all she was doing was pressing her heel into my neck. The lawyer didn't respond. He simply folded his hands on the table and said calmly, "This envelope was submitted to the estate's sealed records 6 months ago. Your grandmother gave it to our office herself. It's not optional." Clarabelle's mouth twitched, her jaw tightening ever so slightly. And that's when I knew. She knew about it. Maybe not what was inside, but enough to be afraid of it. That fear cracked through her composure for just a breath, but I caught it. It flickered across her eyes, and then vanished beneath a practiced blink. My mother gave a forced laugh. "Oh, please. Etta was half senile by then." The lawyer's gaze flicked to her with something that felt like a quiet warning. She was lucid, and the statement was notarized. The room went still again. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, but none heavier than the 3 that mattered least: my mother, my father, and the sister who had taken everything but earned none of it. My hands moved without my permission. I reached forward and pulled the envelope toward me. It was warm from sitting in the sunbeam that had shifted across the table. My thumb rested against the flap, but I didn't open it. Not yet. My head buzzed. My heart beat too loud in my ears. Every thought I'd had in the last 10 minutes collided into one fragile thread. If I open this, I can't unopen it. What if it was nothing? What if it was just a thank you? What if all it did was prove that love doesn't stand up in court? I almost slipped it into my purse. Almost. But then I heard her. Not her voice now, but the voice I knew best, the one that lived in the quiet of the farmhouse, under the creak of the floorboards, behind the smell of lavender and lemon oil. "Don't let them erase you, baby." That's what she'd told me one night, after my grandfather had fallen asleep, and I'd stayed behind to scrub the kitchen floor by hand because the mop had finally given up. She'd sat there in her worn chair, blanket over her knees, eyes soft but fierce. "They'll try, because it's easier than admitting what they've done. But don't let them." I blinked. The courthouse disappeared for a second. I was there again, in that dim kitchen with its humming refrigerator and warped window glass. My knees ached just remembering it. And then I looked at the envelope again. This wasn't clutter. This wasn't sentiment. This was my grandmother's final defense. Clarabelle made a move, like she was going to stand. Her chair scraped an inch back. Her smile was too tight, her voice suddenly too sweet. Honestly, Marisol, if it's just a letter, maybe you can read it later, privately. No need to hold everyone hostage. My lips parted. For once, I didn't shrink back. The lawyer spoke before I did. It was meant to be opened now, in front of the family. That did it. Clarabelle's smile broke. Not shattered, not yet, but cracked. My parents exchanged a glance. My father shifted in his seat. My mother pressed her lips into that familiar, disapproving line. I placed the envelope on the table in front of me. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I didn't realize when that stopped. Then, slowly, I slid my finger under the flap, and Clarabelle's smile vanished like a candle in the wind. I peeled back the flap and reached inside, my fingertips brushing against something firm but small. It wasn't a letter, it was a recorder, a slim, old-fashioned voice recorder with a small, worn button labeled play. My heart lurched. I looked up, eyes scanning the room. Everyone seemed to lean in, though no one moved. The lawyer gave a small, deliberate nod. I placed the recorder on the table and hesitated. The moment stretched too long, like the breath before a scream. Clarabelle sat rigid now, both hands clenched under the table. She didn't blink. I pressed play. At first, just static. Then, her voice, Grandma Etta's voice, soft but steady, filled the silence. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And there's been confusion. Let me be clear. Marisol was the one who never left us. She was there when we forgot where the sugar was, when Hiram fell in the bathroom, when the nights were long and full of shadows. She didn't do it for a reward. But if anyone deserves this company, our legacy, it's her, not Clarabelle, not anyone else. Gasps echoed, like the sound of air leaving a dozen lungs. There was more. Grandpa's voice now, raspy but certain. She carried us when no one else did. She kept the house standing, us standing, when everyone else was too busy pretending they'd care later. The static returned, then silence. I didn't move. The recorder sat there like a stone, heavy with truth. Clarabelle was the first to speak, her voice high and cracking. "That's not real!" She shook her head as if trying to wake from a nightmare. She must have recorded that without them knowing. That's not admissible. Her panic cracked through her performance. The sharp tilt of her voice, the way her shoulders tensed, how she avoided eye contact, none of it looked like someone sure of their innocence. "That's not real," she repeated, louder this time, eyes wild. "You think that proves anything?" "Anyone can fake a voice." The lawyer kept calm, folding his hands. "It was submitted directly by Etta and Hiram Daniels, certified, time-stamped, and notarized. This recording is valid and part of the estate's legal documentation." Clarabelle's chair screeched back. "No," she snapped. "No. This was supposed to be mine. The house, the company, all of it. Everyone knows I'm the one who's successful. I'm the face of the family. She pointed at me like I was something stuck to her heel. She just cleaned toilets and warmed soup." I flinched, but I didn't look away. My parents exchanged nervous glances, then my mother leaned in, her voice laced with a bitter hiss. "You're making a scene." I almost laughed. "I'm making a scene." My hands were shaking again, but I kept them still in my lap. Clarabelle turned to the lawyer. "You're going to let that recording undo everything? That's not how this works." "That's not how this works," She stood now, towering behind the table, a glassy edge in her eyes. She manipulated them. She was always in their ear, making them think she was the saint while the rest of us were out there building real lives. A few neighbors and distant cousins shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Mrs. Ellison from 2 houses down, muttered to her husband, "She's losing it." Clarabelle heard it. She turned sharply. "You all knew it would be mine. You said it yourselves." The room felt like it was spinning, but I stayed still. It was the first time in my life I wasn't apologizing for existing. Clarabelle banged her palm against the table, the noise loud and jarring. "This is a joke. A pathetic, manipulative joke." The lawyer didn't even flinch. "Ms. Daniels," he said, voice cool and firm, "the will and supplemental testimony are clear. Unless there's valid evidence to challenge the documents submitted under state law, this recorder stands as part of the legal estate." My parents sat stone-faced now, not defending her, not defending me, just quiet. It hurt more than I expected. The lawyer turned slightly toward me. "Marisol, you have the floor, should you wish to speak." I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't trust my voice just yet. Clarabelle's breath came in short bursts now, as if she'd run a mile without getting anywhere. Her makeup looked too heavy under the courthouse lights. The mask was slipping. Then I realized the last chair didn't feel so distant anymore. In fact, it felt like the only seat that mattered. All that distance? It gave me perspective, space to see them clearly, to see myself. I reached for the recorder again, feeling its weight. No longer just plastic and tape. It was truth, the kind they could never erase with smirks and whispers. The room sat in an uneasy quiet, thick with judgment and resentment, but I sat still, grounded for the first time. And just when the tide felt like it was finally turning, when my breath evened out and the trembling stopped, Clarabelle slammed down a thick stack of papers on the table. The sound made even the lawyer flinch. The sound of the papers hitting the table cracked through the room like a thunderclap. Even the lawyer flinched, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. Clarabelle stood tall, her chin lifted with a fury that no longer disguised itself behind a polished smile. "These," she announced with dramatic flair, "are the real documents, a signed addendum, one that actually reflects our grandparents' true intentions." She pushed the stack across the table toward the lawyer, her eyes never leaving mine. I didn't blink. I didn't move. The lawyer adjusted his glasses slowly, then reached for the papers. He took his time, unfolding the top sheet, examining it with the calm detachment of a surgeon inspecting a suspicious mass. The room had gone silent. Even the smallest breath felt intrusive. He flipped another page, then paused, his brow furrowed just enough to be noticed. "These documents," he said slowly, "appear to be signed by Hiram Daniels on February 28th of last year." Clarabelle folded her arms, nodding. "Exactly. He made the change after realizing I was the only one capable of running the company." The lawyer's gaze didn't leave the page. "Mr. Daniels was hospitalized on February 12th, he said. He passed away on February 19th. A ripple moved through the room. Clarabelle's face twitched. "You must have the wrong date. That's not... Someone must have..." The lawyer set the papers down. "The date on the signature is not only after his death, but the handwriting is inconsistent with prior samples. And this notary seal," he pointed to the faded stamp at the bottom, "is registered to a woman who lost her license 5 years ago." Gasps, real ones this time. Clarabelle took a step back. "This is ridiculous. They must have made a mistake." "No mistake," the lawyer said, firmer now. "These documents are fraudulent. The court will open a formal investigation." My mother leaned in toward Clarabelle, whispering something I couldn't hear. My father stared at the floor. No one met my eyes. Clarabelle's face flushed crimson. She turned on me with a venom I hadn't seen since we were children. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To ruin me? You were always jealous. You were always weak. And now you're pretending to be the hero?" She slammed her palm against the table again, voice rising with each word. "You think being there at the end made you better than the rest of us? You think spoon-feeding them and wiping their mouths made you worthy?" The words hit like stones, but I stood, not just emotionally, physically. For the first time since the reading began, I stood up from the last chair. Clarabelle's breath hitched just slightly. I picked up the recorder again, my fingers steady now. "I was there," I said, voice quiet but certain. "You weren't." Clarabelle opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the space. I sat with Grandma Etta when she couldn't remember her own name. I held Grandpa's hand when he asked me if dying would hurt. I cleaned their sheets, read to them every night, and watched the light go out of their eyes, knowing I was the only one who cared enough to witness it. My throat burned, but I kept going. "You were at galas and cocktail parties. I was at hospice check-ins. You talked about legacy. I protected it." I held up the recorder. "This is the truth, and you don't get to bury it just because it doesn't flatter you." A murmur rose in the room, not against me this time, but toward her. A shifting current. Some folks looked down, others glared. Clarabelle's facade, always so pristine, so calculated, began to crack. Her lips trembled. Her hands, the ones that had just moments ago flung forged documents like weapons, now curled into fists at her sides. "You want the farmhouse?" she spat. "Fine. You can have your little shack and your martyr complex. Just don't expect anyone to respect you for it." I smiled, not out of spite, but because I finally saw her clearly. "I don't need your respect," I said. "Or theirs. I have theirs." I tapped the recorder gently. "And that's enough." The lawyer cleared his throat, not loudly, but enough to bring the focus back to the head of the table. His eyes swept over the family, then to me. "There is," he said, "one more clause your grandparents left behind." Clarabelle froze. So did I. The air inside the courthouse had turned still, like something holy had just passed through and left us breathless. I stood there, clutching the recorder in one hand, as the lawyer reached into his leather folder, retrieving a second, thinner document. "It was to be revealed only if evidence of fraud arose," he said calmly, his voice slicing through the tension. "And it has." He unfolded the page slowly. "The final clause," he read, "states that in the event any party is found to have tampered with the will, used deception to claim inheritance, or failed to act in the interest of the deceased, all rights and assets, corporate, residential, and financial, shall immediately transfer to Marisol Daniels, sole named caretaker and executor of personal property." Clarabelle let out a sound, half gasp, half moan, and collapsed into the chair that once belonged to Pride. She looked nothing like the sister I'd grown up with. No jewelry or couture could mask the unraveling. Her posture folded inward. Her hands trembled in her lap. My parents didn't say a word. Their eyes darted toward each other like two people on a sinking ship, each hoping the other would plug the hole first. They had nothing left to project, no gloating smirks, no whispered jabs, just silence. I didn't move. I couldn't. The lawyer turned his head toward me, gently now. "Ms. Daniels," he said, with a grace that carried more dignity than any title my family had ever respected, "the court will proceed with finalizing the transfer. The estate, including the Daniels Corporation, the seaside residence, and your grandparents' private holdings, are now legally yours." I heard the words, but it was the weight behind them that hit hardest. Not revenge, not even justice, just truth, finally acknowledged. Clarabelle muttered, "No, that can't be right." Her voice was small now, not the commanding snarl from earlier. "This was never supposed to happen. I was going to—" She didn't finish. And no one was listening anymore. My mother shifted beside her. We didn't know, she said faintly, to no one in particular. We thought they'd gone soft. We didn't realize they'd kept track. I looked over at her, not with hate, just clarity. You didn't care to know, I said. That was the difference. The sun had dipped completely below the horizon outside the courthouse windows. Shadows lengthened across the long oak table. The once vibrant chatter of entitlement had dissolved into a stillness that wrapped around me like armor. And the farmhouse, the lawyer added, as though he'd nearly forgotten, was not an afterthought. Your grandfather specifically marked it as protected land. It borders a future coastal development zone. Based on current assessments, it may be worth more than the other properties combined. Clarabelle's head jerked up. My eyes didn't leave the lawyer's. It's yours alone, he said, sliding a worn iron key toward me. They knew you'd protect it. I reached forward, not with hesitation but with purpose, and closed my fingers around the key. Cold at first, then warm. Something shifted in me. Not loud, not grand, just right. All this time, I'd seen the farmhouse as punishment, a final slap in the face. But they'd known. They always knew what it meant to me. The wild garden, the attic full of old records, the sunroom where Grandma used to read. It was never meant to be a prize. It was home. My father began to speak again, some half-hearted protest about fairness, but his voice sounded tinny, hollow. I didn't even register the words. The people I had once strained to please now looked smaller than the room they sat in. I walked slowly to the end of the table, where my old spot remained, the last chair. I pulled it forward, dragging its weight across the wooden floor until it sat beside the head of the table. Then I sat, not because I needed permission, but because I chose to. For the first time since this all began, I sat where I belonged, centered, certain. The lawyer gathered the documents with care. A few neighbors shuffled to their feet, offering small nods in my direction. Not pity, not praise, just quiet acknowledgement. Clarabelle's last effort came in a whisper. "This was supposed to be mine," she said. "I earned it. I deserve it." I turned to her, calm. "You had your chance. You chose appearances. I chose presence." She looked away. Moments later, we were dismissed. I didn't linger. I walked out into the night air, the old courthouse door closing behind me with a soft thud. The town lights flickered on, one by one, as dusk gave way to evening. I stood at the edge of the steps, the key pressed into my palm, and looked out toward the coastal hills, the place where I grew up, the place that still held echoes of voices, memories in sunbeams, and the scent of lavender that always clung to my grandmother's sweaters. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I whispered to the wind. This time, I decide where I belong. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or mansions. It's finally claiming your own worth. What would you have done if your family had tried to erase you?